Very warm welcome to Capital Sports 3.0. I'm going to stop doing that now. It's not funny. It's not even interesting. I'm Alan Moore. We have a superb show lined up for you tonight. I am joined with my co-hosts Isolt and Andrew Flint in just a moment. Hopefully Andy Mack will be on it later on as well. He is flat on his back, working, not sick. He's really working hard, but he will join us, fingers crossed. We'll have a super special guest. Won't announce who it is just yet, but wait for it. You'll enjoy this because we have a huge discussion to go through. We're going to start off talking about boxing. Of course, Tyson Fury has been ranked in the last couple of weeks. He wants this fight with Anthony Joshua. He doesn't want to fight other fighters, but let's see what he's going to do now, and we'll discuss that in a moment. We also are going to talk about head trauma in contact sport. We know that we saw the happenings in American college and pro NFL football this past week. Also then in rugby as well, some big questions being asked right now, especially in Ireland, by 3 former professionals and internationals as well. And of course, soccer fans misbehaving in a terrible way, but also questions to be asked about the policing of events. And this, of course, happened in Indonesia, but of course, nothing is new there. So we're going to go through all of that tonight on the show. But we're going to start off. I'm going to bring in my 2 co-hosts for this evening, Andrew Flint and Isolt Cody. I'm not going to ask them how they're doing. I know they're doing great. They're looking great as well. And Isolt, great to have you back. Great to have you on as well. So what I got, and by the way, tonight I promise I am not going to mess up with my microphone. Like every time I start to speak and then look and go, oh, I'm on mute. And thankfully I have great colleagues to make sure that I know that I'm on mute. Before we're going to further, Andrew, we spoke about escape to victory last week. Manchester United couldn't even escape without a hammering. It was dreadful. There was that moment at half-time in that tunnel when I'm sure Cristiano Ronaldo and Harry Maguire were thinking, we can't do this. We need to escape.
Wait, hang on a minute. Are you honestly putting Cristiano Ronaldo and Harry Maguire in the same sentence along the same line? Well, okay, I suppose you are being humane here. You're putting down an animal who's got no hope of surviving by just putting me out of my misery early on. So I do appreciate that. But the only thing that makes it slightly better is I believe my father got the wrong kickoff time. He thought it was 4:30, so he didn't even get to watch it. So he escaped it. I had to sit through it. That was horrible. That's all I got to say.
Well, my childhood GAA club lost today by a goal and I was very upset. Isolt, Spurs.
Look, can we just torture one of us at a time? Yeah.
No, keep this going. I like this. Let's share the torture. This is good.
Okay, so the only thing worse than the Spurs result was when I checked today and it turns out Son was my fantasy football captain this week. So like, where are we going with this? Look, Arsenal.
You're speechless. I've never known Isolt to be so speechless.
Arsenal are on a good run in terms of this season thus far. I think the big issue we have is I really thought that coming on the back of the international break, I'm always concerned when there's a break and Spurs don't come and hit the ground running. Because once they get into a funk, my God, are they able to stay there? And that's my concern. For Man United today, like...
No. Don't be commenting on other people's now. Andrew didn't comment on yours.
No, that's fine. I'll comment on Spurs.
My
Spurs,
point
you're absolutely right.
Man United came out in the second half after the first half and like seemed to have a bit of fight in them. Look, they were never going to win the game. They had something. Whereas I think the difficulty is when you find, if you feel that your team just kind of go, okay, well, this is over. Let's not, like, when your only scorer yesterday was Harry Kane and it wasn't through any endeavour of his own in terms of talent, it's difficult. And I think my concern is that when the minute Spurs go and lose a game, especially North London derby, you suddenly go, is this the start of a downward spiral? And the problem is we don't have managers we never have managers who are able to control their emotions in those sort of circumstances. With a downward spiral with Conte, you worry that the next step is, right, Conte's gone.
Yeah.
And Big Sam is in to rescue from relegation.
Look,
there you go.
I love Big Sam. If he came in, any man who managed Limerick is welcome with us.
Right, straight into the first headline. Both of you can comment on this, so I'll start with you on this one. A court case being taken by by Eddie Hearn, who has slapped or bounced Jake Paul with $100 million lawsuit because Jake Paul said that there was some dodgy officiating. It was based on the Katie Taylor Amanda Serrano fight. He said that some of the judges would have been, kind of difficult or sort of were a bit dodgy. He also, in the rematch between Joshua and Usyk, he also said that Glenn Feldman was favoring Anthony Joshua. And I mean, this of course is great. These two men promote fights together. They sort of help each other out. They hold each other's hand. This is pure PR result, isn't it? There's no legal basis for this.
I think, well, there is a legal basis for him taking the case. There certainly is. And I think there's a very serious issue when you make an accusation in relation to match fixing in any sport. Unfortunately, it's much more serious. Well, fortunately, perhaps it's more serious when you make an accusation of match fixing in a sport where there's actually an integrity unit that does something. Boxing, corruption and boxing go hand in hand and have done for, well, time immemorial kind of thing. But the issue here is obviously this is a high profile story, so it will garner all the attention they want. Issuing a lawsuit like that, part of the actual intent is often to make the point, I take what you're saying so seriously that I'm issuing proceedings, so please desist from saying things like this. The issue with making an accusation like this, I suppose, is that when it comes to boxing, and particularly when it comes to the biggest promoters, corruption is a huge issue. Not necessarily that the promoters are doing anything, but if you imagine, a lot of very good boxing podcasts have discussed this kind of recently with some of the awful decisions we've had in fights, particularly the Taylor Catterall fight last year. But essentially, if you're working for someone like Matchroom, because you're essentially working for them, because Matchroom are promoting an event, or Frank Warren is promoting an event, or Top Rank are promoting an event, they're arranging stuff. So you're going to a hotel, you're in and around being fed by them, you're in and around their teams, you're in and around their broadcasters. That doesn't necessarily mean you're being paid off, but you may view it that I'm getting fight nights with this crowd. So what you do in your choices when you view a fight may not necessarily be down to corruption in the sense that we think of someone being paid off, but rather to do with the fact that this is where your bread is buttered kind of thing, that you're conscious of who employs you or who is having you be a judge at sanctioned events because they're not refusing to have you, or a team isn't saying we're not having this judge. Like when these awful scorecards happen, and I don't think there were awful scorecards in Katie Taylor's fight against Amanda Serrano, but when awful scorecards happen, questions need to be asked. The difficulty is, do I think Matchroom are bribing and paying off judges? I don't, because I think some of them are so embarrassing.
I think with same with sports, because in football and soccer, the home side has to look after the referees. They have to look and the officials. They have to look after lunch and putting them up overnight and so on. That's the onus on the home team. Same, for example, in Gaelic Games Europe, the home club have to look after referees when they come in. There's a budget set aside. And I do think that sometimes boxing judges, they're very well looked after with some promoters. So I've seen it myself in Germany when Sauerland promotions, when the officials came in, they were treated like kings and queens. And
that's the thing. And there's a difference between that and someone physically giving you a brown envelope and going, I'm paying you. And it's the implication of one. Like, do I think these two guys, this is a publicity-based proceedings? Do I think it will ever move anywhere? Probably not. I think this is for optics.
Okay.
But boxing has so much that they need to do.
Andrew, for you on this, I mean, Jake Paul, we spoke about him before, that he's been really bringing boxing into disrepute and, kind of just going in against basically lumps of meat and just beating them up. Do you think that this can go anywhere? I mean, do you think that, I don't know, if someone took the same case in football, would it win as well?
Well, I think the nature of boxing as a sport is so much broader than, I would argue, most other sports, in the fact that promotion is so central to it. And there's no question in my mind, or no doubt my suspicions are, that Jake Paul is doing this for attention, number one. I don't imagine this is going to go a great deal further. I'm sure he'll have to put out a statement retracting or whatever. But like he sort of mentioned, once proceedings have been started, it legitimizes the complaint, even if it is proven to be wrong. It gives it a platform. And that's realistically what Jake Paul wants. Now, forget the boxing for a moment. As a promoter, as a self-promoter, he is right up there because of this is where he's got himself to in the first place. As a YouTuber, he's understands what appeals to people. I think the what you mentioned about the pressure that boxing judges are under from virtually all angles is pretty much universal at all levels. Out near where I am in Yekaterinburg, for example, there was a fight. I haven't followed his career closely, and you guys will know a lot more. But Liam Smith came to Yekaterinburg about a year ago, I think it was, and he was a couple of ex-colleagues of mine went to the fight. They spoke to him beforehand and daren't speak to him afterwards. He was incandescent, was a very polite way of putting it. The local boxer was adjudged to, I think it was a split decision, if memory serves me right. I mean, you could go for any level. The pressure is there, and I think the most salient point here is what you mentioned about. It might not necessarily be a direct bribe or illegal movement. It might simply be, I want to keep on the right side of these people. If I can get bigger fights down the line, it's exactly what we said so many times before. When football journalists want accreditation, they daren't say anything critical because they don't want their accreditation revoked. It's basically the same thing.
The same with football referees. And referees, like you have managers coming up, we don't want this referee ever again. We don't want this person. We've seen it in Italy with Calciopoli when they're picking referees. It's endemic.
Serena Williams refusing to have an umpire ever again for her career.
Exactly. Andrew's frozen, but we'll hopefully we'll get him back in just a moment. We are going to go on to the next story. Tyson Fury, of course, he retired, of course, to get good attention. He then said that he was coming back, that he wanted to fight Anthony Joshua. He gave him a deadline. There were supposedly Joshua's team were looking at the documents. They didn't sign them. And then, of course, Tyson Fury, the next thing he does is what, folks? Yes, of course. He has a U-turn and says that he's waiting now for him to sign his fight. So in the space of 3 days, Tyson ranting on YouTube and on social media and threatening and shouting. So this is something that we would see from bare knuckle boxing within the traveling community, the gypsy community. Tyson Fury is bringing this now to world championship heavyweight level. I mean, is there something wrong with Tyson because it seems to be getting a little bit too out of hand at this stage?
It's God. I feel huge sympathy for whoever's in charge of his social media, because they must be like, God, we're going to lock him out of his own accounts, because if you leave him on for long enough, he'll retire twice in a week. He'll call someone else out, and he'll change his mind on various things. I think the issue here, obviously, I'll give my view in a minute on just the legal side of things in terms of why Anthony Joshua would be an absolute fool to be signing something just based on a deadline being issued by Tyson Fury. But the problem here is that Tyson Fury issued this deadline, and then when the deadline came and went for contracts to be signed, he decided to go online and say the offer was gone. AJ, it's behind you now. You're not getting this fight. Blah de blah de blah. And the reaction from boxing fans was not what he expected. There was no one going, "Oh, AJ's in the wrong." The vast majority of boxing fans were saying, why is he doing this? It's absolute nonsense. We don't want to see him fight Manuel Char, who's his backup fight. We don't want to see that. We want to see this fight. If it doesn't happen, this isn't about AJ not signing. It's about Tyson Fury being absolutely ludicrous in his demands. And the reason he's being ludicrous is because even his own promoter, Frank Warren, initially was saying, oh yeah, this is the deadline, they need to stick to it. And then obviously someone told Frank Warren to, think logically about this. There are competing broadcasters, one of whom AJ has an exclusivity deal with, obviously DAZN, and the cost to buy someone out of that alone would be astronomical. So what is essentially happening now is not a discussion as to whether or not the fighters are interested in fighting, by all accounts. It's a discussion as to how the broadcasters, the competing rights they have, presumably there's probably a holding company who owns AJ's image rights. He has his own management company. They all need to see what their respective buy-in is, how they carve up rights on an international broadcasting stage. What countries do certain broadcasters get, or to what level? Who gets even the click? So when you basically do the short images from any of the fight, who gets those rights? Who gets to broadcast them and at what time? It's a minefield of things that they have to work on. So Tyson Fury issuing pointless deadlines either shows his blatant lack of understanding of what's going on here, which I would find difficult given how many high-profile fights he's had, or shows that essentially he doesn't really want the fight. And that is a potential, that he's going out and putting out nonsensical deadlines, but then realising that fight fans, despite fight fans getting being given an unfair reputation as if they're not the brightest of groups, and I class myself as a huge fight fan, so I'll take it on the head. They know and understand that BT and DAZN are two different companies. They understand from watching sports that these things need to be done. So I'm sure most fight fans are taking an intelligent approach and going, if this doesn't happen, it's not because of unwillingness to fight. It's because things need to happen to stage it.
This is it. And I mean, the rhetoric coming out from Tyson Fury, which, I mean, we've known that he's come out with some horrible slurs, some stuff that he didn't need to say, that, you know, people were at first lapping up and buying into, but then suddenly people were taking a step back, especially people from the traveling community were thinking, this isn't us. You know, this is what he wrote in a statement this week or 2 days ago. Now, Joshua, the ball is really in your court, son. Everybody is done. If you're a man and you've got any sort of dignity and pride about you, you'll get this contract signed today. There's no more days, weeks. You've had 2 weeks and you still haven't signed it. Show the public that you're a really big coward and don't sign it. I don't care. And he went on to say, either way, if you sign it now or you don't, it makes no difference to me at all. You're a beaten man and I'm a world champion. I'm chucking you a massive bone, but I know I can punch your face in, so I'm willing to give you an opportunity. There's nothing more to do. Everyone is happy. Isel, do you think that maybe this could be, he's had mental health issues in the past. Is this a manifestation of this as well? He's also has substance abuse issues as well, related to mental health issues. Is this the time that people need to say, listen, Tyson, you need to go speak with somebody?
I don't necessarily know, and I'd be loath to kind of assume what his mental health state is. I think the big issue with Tyson Fury is Tyson Fury on social media has always had, as you said, he comes out with things and he says them, and there's no control, there's no thought process, whether it's to do with illness or simply just to do with the fact that he just doesn't think about these things. And no one is saying, right, Tyson, maybe don't do this, or maybe this isn't the best look, because clearly over the years we've learned one thing about Tyson Fury is that there is no one standing beside him going, this isn't a good thing to say. And unfortunately, for unlike not just on his own social media, but the likes of IFL will always give him a camera or will always ring him up and record him saying something and put it out there. And the difficulty is, AJ isn't the one who's coming out of this looking foolish.
Yeah.
And we'll see how it develops, because people want to see the fight. But the longer this goes on, the more I become convinced we're not going to see it.
Yeah. And look, as I said, paper never refused ink. And that's the case with Tyson Fury. And unfortunately, some of the people who are around him, including his relations, his father and so on, they're as bad, if not worse. And they think it's normal to behave like this and to talk like this. And that's the way business is done, is like to shout and roar and threaten. But unfortunately, as you said, the legal side of it is very, very different. Now, we're trying to get Andrew Flint back, but we'll be coming back in just a moment with our first special guest, a very, very special guest. He's been on us before, of course, on the radio, but he'll be back in just one moment, and you're going to enjoy what we're going to speak about, because we're going to come straight back in with a video.
And Tagovailoa suffered some type of an injury on this play. We have Teddy Bridgewater in the game right now. Tagovailoa, oh boy, getting up. Oh my goodness, that's an awful, awful sight to see. They will take him to the sideline immediately. Oof.
His ability to make adjustments at halftime.
To a rolling left with the grain, and down he goes. Slung down at his own 48-yard line. Josh Tupu. And And Mike Ryan tells us when he sees that, and he's watching this as you are as well, it's a neurological response to head trauma. So they're stabilizing him right now. Head hits the turf. Elbow hit first, then the head. And again, a heartbeat just to turns around just like that.
Again.
Okay. 2 knockouts inside the space of a week. Tua Tagovailoa. Awful situation. We're delighted to welcome on Craig Klein, of course, former executive with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and of course with Fulham FC as well in England. Start off straight away. Tua, I mean, he was going for number 1 the draft, Craig. He was a terrific player at Alabama, which of course at a time were a powerhouse of US college football. He got a horrific injury 2019, dropped down, has ended up now signing with Miami. Could this be a career over for him, Craig?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm so sorry to correct you, Alan. I was never an executive with the Jaguars. I consulted with the Jaguars. Executive,
Okay.
same ownership group over at Fulham. But yeah, consulted straight for ownership there. Got to see the concerns they could put into concussion protocols, and unfortunately, in the NFL, concussion protocols are never enforced. It's just routinely. They just go around it all the time. And here's a textbook example. It's an example that got caught there on national television in a way that nobody can deny. And what they've done is they've blamed an outside consultant. They've fired an outside consultant who was presumably not even an employee. So we're probably talking about terminating a contractor. That's how these things are set up, to make sure that when they're caught on national television, having a $30 million, an extremely expensive asset, a guy who adds many millions a year, having his head smashed to mush, that they have the outside consultant ready to go to put their hands out. And guess what I was? I was an outside consultant.
I'm sorry for laughing. Sorry, you nailed it, and you're very direct with it. So the doctor from the NFL Players Association, the trade union for players, he got fired.
So he's the unaffiliated doctor. So yeah, he is an independent doctor by all accounts, basically in the sense that he isn't affiliated to a particular team, and it was deemed that he was the person in the wrong. They interviewed following the second of the concussion incidents that we saw there. They interviewed him and the team doctor. The idea of an independent doctor, there's 2 on each sideline, I think, to the best of my knowledge, for the NFL games. Independent doctors are not an unusual concept in sports where concussion is common. So there's spotters for rugby as well. And the idea is that if you have an independent party, it means that a team which may, for whatever reason, be viewing the game from a particular slant, that a doctor won't feel under pressure to make a decision because of team influences or underlying. They're there solely to make an independent call. The problem here is that while the independent doctor is one facet in the entire system, this isn't an uncommon thing in NFL. He should never have been playing after the first incident. And Chris Nowinski, who's obviously very well known for his huge repertoire of knowledge on the concussion area, he tweeted after the first game going, if he's playing the next day, we need to have serious discussions. It's just horrendous. And the thing is, thankfully, this is all captured on TV and it's getting airtime. But the reality is, as Craig said, any concussion protocols in NFL, even after the huge settlement they've made with players, it's lip service to an idea when you see something like that happen. It is appalling.
Craig, I asked you on that when you were with Jacksonville as a consultant. Okay, so consultant. So I'll clear it up again. How often did you know of? I'm not saying that you see, because of course you're not an expert, but how often do you know of that players went out playing with a concussion or with a serious injury?
Well, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know in the affirmative to answer that question exactly. But what I do know is the attitude that everyone in the industry had towards concussion protocol. And, it was likened to me by an NFL owner, which I could barely process what I was hearing. It was said that, no one reports that sort of stuff. That's like an OSHA violation, which refers to the United States Occupational Safety and Health Act, one of the most sacred pieces of legislation in the United States that keeps workers safe in factories. I was surprised because normally people don't talk like movie supervillains Like they have at least enough arrogance to pick different words. But to say, one, to totally disregard it, and then two, to choose OSHA of all things as the example of something that should be disregarded was just, for me, mind blowing. And I should have known. But to see that sort of stuff at the very top, enforced aggressively at every level, so that no one on the sideline is making any sort of call, was shocking.
Craig, in continuing on that theme, just to sort of the lack of respect, and I want to go back to Isak on one thing she mentioned just before now. Would there be, for example, a view of players that they're simply just meat bodies or meat bags, or just kind of they're disposable and replaceable, and especially a kind of a racist element to it as well?
Oh, definitely racist. And the position in the NFL that personifies this is the running backs. The running backs are considered just usable commodities that only have so many touches to use, and it's well known that they'll be used up and that their performance levels will drop more than a standard deviation before the end of their first contract. And of course, they're wage controlled for the first 4 or 5 years of their contract generally. So it's a bad situation where people understand they are not going to be getting a second contract almost all the time, and that you kind of want to use them up to some extent because it's a commodity that's in a these are games of attrition, and it's a commodity with a very short shelf life, and it's absolutely understood.
Is this comes back to what you're saying with like the legal things for people and so on? I mean, Greg mentioned with the occupational safety and the Health Act in America, OSHA. I mean, at what point do lawyers independently not just take I've just blanked, I think it's tort cases, when everyone comes together. When do they start doing that, or even individually? Because there doesn't seem to be, it seems to be controlled almost by the union. But when do lawyers do something?
Yeah. It's a very different world. I suppose we see the difference between America and here. Like, obviously in Ireland, just to be very clear, we don't have class actions. So we can have linked cases, but they're not class actions like we have in America. And the decision on what seems to happen in America, and Craig would be much better able to give a comment on this in terms of his understanding of it, because my perspective is looking at it legally from here, which is very different. But there seems to be while we have the huge concussion settlement, the reality of what is happening there is the narrative is being dictated in terms of that case, and taking a class action is very much a case of player bodies being very much at the fore of what is actually happening, as opposed to, so when you have player bodies being involved, they still have a vested interest in the sport. And I think the big issue here is with NFL, as opposed to other sports. I think we see them saying that they're putting in place policies, etc. But then we see the reality of what is going on the field, and it's televised for millions of people globally to watch. And the reality is that all the settlements in the world don't mean anything if you don't change the policies and the behaviours that stop these being a necessity into the future. Any concussion settlement is just going to continue to be repeated because nothing is changing in the sport. And if the value of those settlements doesn't actually put a dent into the value of the franchises and a dent into the value of the sport as a whole, no one's going to care, because the reality is financially they're in the same position. It's when you have in Ireland, we have a big thing when you have a claim for, let's say, personal injuries. There's two types of damages, and I think this is really important when you look at how it's done. There's damages which are considered basically to put you back in the position you would have been in if it hadn't been for the accident you had. But let's say a car crash, whatever. You break your arm, there's a fixed amount, here you go. And then we give you an extra type of damages which punishes the wrongdoing. And the reality is the NFL, as an organisation, has never been punished in a way that meant meaningful change was going to be brought about.
Okay, on that, when we look at, say, for example, the headlines, or not just the Tyson Fury, with this one, when he released a statement, and he said that he has no timetable to return, that he on Thursday, of course, Thursday Night Football was live when he got the second injury, and it was a very simple one. He just basically fell backwards and banged the back of his head. Said he had a headache Thursday night and Friday morning. He was at the University of Cincinnati Hospital, and that, he basically said that, okay, this is what he said: I'm not even really thinking about timetables or anything regarding him so this was through his McDonald, saying, like, after the CT scans and so on, that these are people, this is the words coming from the club, from his team. These are people we mutually invest in, and somebody I've grown very, very close to. So when it comes to head injuries and concussions, with things that's severe, the only thing I'm worried about is the person first. We're just worried about getting him healthy, getting all the testing done that needs to be done, us working with him so we can feel good about where that injury's at. Then we'll cross the bridge in terms of timetables of however long and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So this was the head coach of the Dolphins, sounding very like what you just said, Craig, that, investing in people, that this is an asset that they're going to use. Quarterbacks, of course, have an awful lot more value to a club, and a good quarterback like Tua as well, compared to some, kind of 6th or 7th round pick or someone who's just going to be in the league for a year or two. Before I want to play one piece of video on this, again, American football. Craig, before we go to that, just in terms of playing injured, we have at the moment on the active roster, well, of course, one less after this incident, 1,696 players, so 1,695 as of when we're preparing for the show yesterday. How many would you reckon have any value to the clubs? And on top of that, how many do you reckon will go on to a career in not just coaching, but in the executive lounge of clubs?
I'm sorry, are you talking, what league are you talking about, Alan? I'm so sorry I missed.
NFL.
Oh, geez. Oh, I mean, the burn, the average 3 years is I believe, between 2 to 3 years is the average career length in the NFL. I mean, the burn rate is immense, and if you're not white, if you're, I mean, how many females ever have gotten meaningful roles in the NFL? Pretty much zero. I mean, it is a white male mafia club, and the purpose is white collar crime. That's the purpose, and these things are easier to control when it's an old boys network who all know the money laundering agents, and that's really what all of this is about. That's what the sponsorships are about. That's what everything behind the scenes is about in big money sport, is organized crime. So yeah, we're not going to be handing much out to the players, I don't think. The point is to use them and monetize their injuries, so that they, to spread, corporate control and messaging. So yeah, those players, they're going to get nothing generally. I'll tell you really quickly, when they get injured, one of the things the NFL did is the NFL had their lawyers agree to a race norming policy, where they say, if you're black and you're a former NFL player and you can't really read very well, we're not going to test you by the average person standard. We're going to cherry pick race norming data that presupposes a lower reading standard, so that after we've monetized your CTE, after we've monetized all the tau bodies that we're putting in your brain through concussions, we're going to say you were probably dumb from the beginning because you're black, and deny you all your claims. And that's what the NFL is, and they're making billions out of
it. I don't know what to say. I know we discussed this before, but oh my goodness. Okay, yeah. All right. I'm going to have to process that, but first we'll go to a video. And this is of a game last week. I think, Andrew, you sent in this to our chat. This is a desperate hit in a college football game, a big match between Tulsa and I think it was Mississippi State. So, and I'll explain a little bit afterwards. But this is the offensive coordinator, the offensive coach speaking afterwards. So we did a bit of the play, and then, of course, the offensive coach speaking.
It's a loss, but once again, much to be proud of for the Golden Hurricane. 35-27, the final in Oxford.
Well, I mean, we're always going to go with the safety of our players first. And, for him, I just didn't think he was well enough to go back into the game and really play the way he wants to play. He wanted to continue to keep playing because he's just that type of competitor.
Now, the coach was speaking about his quarterback, who you saw, the captain of the team, in that I had double-checked that he wasn't speaking about Keelan Stokes, his wide receiver, who took a horrific knockout. I wanted to put the video up, but it was frightening. He took a helmet-to-helmet clash, tried to stand up, stumbled and fell a couple of times. Andrew, so do you remember that? I think, Craig, you've seen that as well on Twitter. But he was speaking about his quarterback. All the highlights, you watch it from ESPN, all the highlights have been edited out of the head-to-head clash. They show all the plays of the game, the most horrific moment they don't show. Now, okay, in one way, I accept that because we don't want to see that horrible situation, a young man getting his brains knocked silly. But another way, it was weird that they just covered it all over, and the coach is speaking about the quarterback, not putting him in because he took a couple of knocks when he slid in for extra yards. Isa, start with you. I mean, okay, come back on that just with the college football, because remember, these kids have been getting smashed in the head from Pee-wee, from 7, 8 years of age, all the way through. So, as Craig said, by the time they reach NFL, 3 years is actually a good career because they've already played for 20-odd years, or 15 to 20 years. Isa, you wanted to come in on that?
I think I just feel very strongly about the fact that, as it really ties in quite well, I think, with what Craig has said. And Craig, again, feel free to correct me, but he's talking about the quarterback because the quarterback is valuable. He's important. So when you edit out images that need to be seen, however uncomfortable they are, the purpose of seeing is that people go, this is happening. Make an education judgment call on whether they want to participate in a sport or their kids to participate. But more importantly, where people see players getting injured, they have to call out the sport and call out what they're doing to protect athletes. And unfortunately, it's very easy for a coach to talk about a quarterback. It's talking about your star player in all likelihood, or a player who is the most influential. And it's really worrying that that's also where an interviewer felt they should go.
And I watched it in full. I'm a big college football fan. I watched it in full. I looked at the interview. I saw the local, and that was the local broadcast in Tulsa, who were like, come on, boys, we're doing well. They've lost 2 matches in a row, or 2 games in a row, but they're coming very, very close, especially to a 16th ranked team who are doing well, playing in Oxford, Mississippi. Oxford, Mississippi is Mississippi State, correct, Craig?
No, sorry, Oxford. I think it's just University of Mississippi or Mississippi.
Old Miss. Okay, so I kept thinking it was in Oxford. Andrew, since you're back in with us, thankfully, you sent in that clash of helmets that just played the aftermath of it there. You were really taken aback by it, and privately you were saying that it shocked you, the sort of reaction to it, and especially online.
Yeah, I mean, it's the value. There's so many ways to describe the word value, and you mentioned the value of the quarter, but that's an inevitable focus of the coach. But any player in any sport, when there's a clash like that, my first reaction is ouch, obviously, but the second one is when you see players get up and want to carry on, you've got to start asking, why do they want to carry on? Do they even know in that moment why they want to carry on? Drilled into them, like you say, from such a young age, toughen up. This is a sport that values your ability to literally bounce back. Well, should it value the ability to bounce back? What worries me particularly, and we said this so many times before on this show, and about not just American football, but plenty of contact sports, the decision has to be taken out. The decision whether the player should be allowed to carry on has to be taken out of the hands of the player themselves, firstly. The coach, secondly. It has to be a completely independent voice. But then again, the questions are going to be asked. If there's an independent medical adjudicator, whatever you want to call the person that we could bring into sports, and I strongly believe should be, how are they going to get pressured into it? What is most important? What a product is on screen. There's no point trying to skip around it. It is a product. And particularly when we talk about college sports, this is what really, I'm never going to accept this. I'm never going to get my head around this. These students, boys, effectively. I mean, grown boys, but boys still, not fully developed adults. They are being monetized beyond all belief, and told this is what you have to do to get a 1% chance of a very, very short career span that is almost certainly going to have an impact, quite literally, short term, medium term, and long term. Who is able to step in and say, hang on a minute, however much you've been told, this is a valuable product.
Craig,
if that's the case, if it's a promoter. It's just wrong.
Craig, on that, I mean, just on college football, before we step on to the next subject, and Craig will stay with us. I know, Cian, thank you very much, because Cian said it has to be taken away from players. He also has a good comment about the Irish rugby team. I'll see a couple more comments in here as well. Craig, in terms of high school and college sports, we're talking about the monetization. It's a very different system, as you know, from professional soccer in Europe. Does professional soccer in, for example, England, do something better than the way sports are run in America, or are they both as bad? Or what? Can you just compare and contrast? Because you've lived and worked in both.
Well, you know, the problem is the hits are the show, right? The hits are the show. It's like smoking. You know, when people said smoking's bad, the tobacco industry said, no, smoking isn't bad. Smoking out of a corncob pipe on Tuesday night is bad. You know, they kept on trying to find the healthy kind of smoke. And that's what people are doing in the concussion industry. It really doesn't matter where. You know, football in England, especially men's football in England, especially adult men's football in England, could be made safe. You could just take out a lot of the heading and come up with much better protocols for body collisions, where you could really make it quite safe. Girls sports, no, not at all. And I mean, girls football, no. You know, there's no chance. I mean, you can't even the body collisions alone are just rocking the brain. And it's like smoke, where no smoke is good. And if you're asking how much is bad, all of it. And you know, at least with football, with soccer, I mean, it's the beautiful game, right? We're there to see the ball roll on the ground and go into the net. In hockey and in boxing and some of these other sports, UFC, which, you know, is just assault, you know, obviously these aren't sports. The whole thing is the damage. And how can you make that safe? You can't, of course. And the problem is that sports ownership in collision sports is consolidating. You know, the same people that own the NFL are taking over professional wrestling, and they're going to be getting in with the boxing agents and starting owning the TV rights, and they're taking over UK football and NFL and baseball and NBA. You know, and they're consolidating these industries, partially for liability reasons and partially for other terrible reasons. But yeah, in England, they are cleaning some stuff up. They are starting to ban heading in child sport. Thank goodness, taking it out of practice. But it's not a real effort. It's just window dressing.
On that, I mean, I want to ask you all before we go on to, because Cian actually was like, you just go to the NFL Rugby League, and you, of course, have a long way to go to take the issues away from concussion, as you can see it's on the screen, and so many ex-players are coming out explaining their own stories. Again, that's very, very true. I'm going to ask you all, before we go on to the next, the video that I'm going to show you, and it's exactly what Craig said, it's exactly what you all understand. What I'm going to ask you is straight question, okay? Straight question. And people who are watching and listening, they can, you know, you can write in or just think yourselves, what is it? Andrew, when there's a massive tackle in football, someone's driven over the sideline, do you go, oh?
I have been guilty of that in the past.
Okay.
I can't pretend otherwise.
Craig, a massive hit in an NFL game when a guy is going in, about to reaching out to touch, to put the, you know, to break the line, to go in for a touchdown, and someone drives him out of bounds, you go, oh yeah.
I remember doing that. I can't believe it, but yeah.
Easel, like last second punch, the fighter's on the ropes, he's getting battered, the referee's about to step in. I'm thinking of Harold Graham, actually, and Julian Jackson in Donal Medina back in, I think it was 1991. And suddenly a punch from nowhere knocks the boxer out. Do you go, oh, cool?
So I have two reactions, and I'll be very fair in this. That's basically like you're describing my version of porn. Like, you know, I live for boxing. Let's just be appropriate here. It's what I live for. I can't help that. It's my thing. However, I also do this thing where my instant reaction may be, oh my God, that's like, oh my God, wow, blah, blah, blah. I always notice with the worst knockout in live, even if I might be up on my feet and cheering, I notice I've instinctively winced. It's something I do, and I go like that. My shoulders go up, because no matter how great it is to see, let's say, someone knocking out a fighter you're cheering for gets a KO in the last minute, you still have that instant reaction that you've seen someone get hurt. And when it's one of those knockouts, I'll very briefly say, I can remember being in Wales, in Cardiff. David Price got knocked out, I think, by Povetkin. Or did he knock Povetkin out? He got knocked out by Povetkin because he was winning the fight very near the end. And I honestly, there was 80,000 or 70,000 people in the arena. It went silent. It was such a ferocious hit that people were up on their feet and then they were quiet, because your gut reaction is, I've seen something scary.
Okay. I can say, from a boxing point of view, I've knocked out a few different people in my time, and honestly, when the person goes down, you kind of just go, yes, and then you kind of go, oh, I shouldn't be thinking that. But at the same time, when you think about it, the first instinctive reaction you have, and when it comes to you kind of smile and you get a little bit of a rush.
The first one, which one comes first? All of us have basically admitted the same thing, and that is what sports promoters understand. Look, I mean, let me just have one quick dig. Erling Haaland today is an absolute monster, but the real Haaland incident that I will always, and I fully admit, I still treasure, I'll be honest, Alf Inge standing over Roy Keane, telling him he's faking an injury, and Roy Keane getting him back, charging in, studs high at his knee, and I still watch that and think, good on you. Now, that is awful of me to say, and yet that's what we've all admitted, and that is what sports promoters tap into, because they know that too. True. Who admits it?
Look, I'm going to put this next video up, and this is why I have asked you all, and we're kind of gearing towards this, because the next talk is more of a legal talk as well, and Craig is important to take part in this. So this is something that caused me a bit of concern, and there's different times when I've kind of go, oh, but at the same time, when I caught my son watching these videos, I think I'd rather seen or catching and watching porn, to be honest with you, and not bestiality, but just porn, because this made me a lot more worried. Sorry, Tim.
Katrakilis to Tabaki. Look at Nonadu. Has gone straight down. That was head on head.
Arrête du temps.
He's had the wrong place to meet. Seeing perhaps a little bit too much of that. We must reinforce the point.
True, trying to get through the gap, the upload, and the pop pass up to Luffy. Oh, the referee.
Cocotte pour envoyer le jeu sur Marc Giraud. Marc Giraud parvient à retrouver
Now, I picked that for two reasons. One, to show that the Tua, when he was knocked out the second time on Thursday, when his hands were like this above his head, and they said that's a reaction for a brain injury. That's what happens. We see it in boxing as well. Sometimes boxers are on their back and they're still trying to punch because they don't know they're knocked out. I've been told that by a friend of mine. He's a lawyer in Brussels. When he boxed the first time, big fight he had, he was knocked out in just 20 seconds. And he said he didn't remember being knocked out. He came across to London for these championships and got knocked out. It was a shock. We thought he was going to win. He just got, boom, sparked out. Second was, it was put together with music. It was made to look dynamic. It was made to look interesting. And this is a little bit of the information on the video itself. You can see the amount of views, almost 500,000 views, and it's brutal knockouts. And then, of course, rugby, brutal knockouts part 2. And the video that will make you love rugby, brutal big hits, rugby moments. You know, so if you're saying boxing's porn for you, this is like this is it shocked the hell out of me, to be honest with you.
So there's two ways of viewing this. I think that's the kind of thing that for people who want to see an end to the likes of rugby and don't want to see kids playing it, that's their ammunition right there. When you start to take out those big hits and like categorize them, while I might love sports that have a concussive element, unfortunately, because of the very nature of I love rugby and boxing, by the same token, I don't want to see someone getting CT. I don't want to see a collection of videos of people who in years to come may suffer long-term effects. And I think people clipping those and putting them together, unfortunately, while we go, oh, like that's someone selecting those moments, as Andrew and Craig have both rightly pointed out, that's exactly what the sport taps into, that people want to see these moments. I will say, and I feel very strongly on this, I will say that there has been a huge effort by World Rugby and various organizations to ensure that more and more of the commentators who we hear on like the mainstream shows, so let's say on the likes of BT Sport, that they have a tie-in now with the governing bodies where they're explaining to them, when you're seeing things like basically why it's a foul, and they are reiterating the message back where they see big hits that are rendering people concussed. They're reiterating the message that the sport needs to be safer, because most of the commentators we hear are guys who have played in the last 10 years and are now seeing their contemporaries obviously going through very difficult times as a result of playing rugby. And there is an effort on the part of mainstream broadcasters to really change how that message is getting out there. But something like that is not what you want children watching.
And by the way, later on that video that they're selling merchandise, Be Rugby. So this is what I know. I've seen kids here watching these kind of videos. I've seen Tim. He started off watching Brian O'Driscoll's Greatest Tries. This, and then all of a sudden they start watching these other ones and I heard the kids today at a match talking about how like that rugby's a great game because if you don't like someone, you can start to kick them when they're on the ground. I'm like, no. I've been that person on the ground, so maybe people didn't like me. I don't know. Maybe that was the case that they were kicking me. Craig, would the NFL or NCAA, would they have the same kind of view on telling commentators, don't be bigging up these massive hits and these kind of basically future walking suicide victims?
It's a two-track system. You guys have alluded to the fact that everything is structured to incentivize the media to look past these things or to play them down or to create these miracle narratives where, we followed the 2-week protocol and it was absolutely perfect and he was 100% ready to go after 2 weeks, so it worked absolutely perfectly. There's this incentive to absolutely take the piss and just completely fake any sort of good faith effort to show the injuries and to make it clear to the audience and especially the kids what sort of risks are involved. At the same time, we do see incremental process. As much as the structural stuff is terrible and makes everyone sort of take the piss, especially the local media, at the national level, at the league level, we do see incremental process where they're starting to put forward messaging that's a little bit more honest. It's very slick, though. Oftentimes they say, "Ooh, what a terrible hit. Sign up for our NFL safe tackling course, where for just $55 a year, your 6-year-old can learn how to tackle Peyton Manning the safe way." And it's progress, but you wonder if it's ever going to be actually safe.
It's monetized progress, and I guess that's business is business. And very quickly on this, I'm going to ask you, did, for example, we were talking last week about the great goal scored by Pelé in that classic match in 1942 in Paris, Stade de Cologne, that basically equalized against the brutal Nazi overlords. Of course, I'm talking to Craig. Before you start panicking, I'm talking. This isn't some time travel machine or fancy in my head. It could be CTE in my brain. I don't know. But this is about the Escape to Victory movie. Kids, I know so many guys who end up, wrenching their shoulders out, getting concussed by trying to copy Pelé's bicycle kick, his overhead kick, in the playground, especially in our playground it was concrete and tarmac. Would the Alfie Gahaland incident with Roy Keane, did that inspire any kids to do the same, to basically take out opponents knee high?
I wouldn't quite go as far to say that exact example. We supported it, but I don't think we would have gone quite as far as try to copy Roy. Although what I would say, the overhead kick is just one of those emblematic, impossible feats that schoolboy footballers just simply cannot do. I remember seeing it in person for the first time. Sam Robertson was our captain, the under-14As, and he was let's just say he developed very early, and he was a phenomenal athlete and sportsman. He pulled off an overhead kick in training. I thought, wait, hang on a minute, that only happens on a screen. You can't actually do that. But he did it so balletically. He landed perfectly fine, and he made it look really safe. And I thought, yeah, I don't care how cool that looks. I was a defensive midfielder. I wasn't exactly a classy, instinctive player like that. There was no way I was going to try that. So however much it was inspiring to watch it, even then, it didn't inspire me, thankfully, to try and copy it. But you want to copy the products. You want to copy the stars. That is what sells. That is what it's not even what sells. You don't need to sell it. Show it to a child, they will want to do it. They want to copy it. Tony Yeboah's goal in 1995, hitting it off the crossbar, bouncing down and up again. That wasn't dangerous, but everybody tried to do it and they couldn't. Overhead kicks, don't worry, I didn't. And there's a very good reason why, because only the very best can actually pull it off.
Yeah, I tried, so I wasn't very good. Okay, we're going to come back in a moment with kind of a story that is continuing to grow. And this, I want to keep the three guys in was for this. Or two guys and lady, excuse me, because this is, I'm sorry, I'm being gender neutral in that. Guys is like, no,
I'm from Ireland. I'm used to that. Please don't explain it to me. I refer to lads, and I mean that.
Lads. That's
men, women, children, dogs. I call the dogs the lads. So yeah,
it's so funny when I was in university in Ireland. So this is a horrible segue. When I was in University in Ireland, and there was a girl, I remember she was stunningly beautiful, as in Maynooth, so I was starting my master's, stunning beautiful girl, like just, amazing looking girl. And eventually I said, okay, I got courage to speak with her. So I did. And sitting there, like, have a chat, and she was kind of shy and quite, lovely Irish, really auburn hair, and the kind of, it was just lovely. And then she opened her mouth, and it was just the biggest. It was like she was like,
what? Why did this segment come immediately after I started speaking? What's wrong with my voice?
No, it's like you just mentioned you said lads, and she just, I said, did you see, such and such a game? And she went, lads, like, come on. She had this brutal West Cork accent. She's from West Cork, had this horrible village accent. Well, it wasn't horrible, but it just didn't go. It's like, I don't know, if just think of some beautiful model and she walks in and starts speaking like Frank Bruno or something, or it's like David Beckham, this Adonis, and then he has a voice like a Teletubby. It doesn't match up. There's something wrong.
Before you get to go on to the next topic, I will say, go after this call and look up the ESAT Digiphone app.
Yes. Hello, it's me, the guy from the bar. I know. I'll try to find that and play it because it's priceless. I love that.
We've got
I'll find it. We've
got a very segment. Let's continue on with the show, please, Alan.
Okay, so we're going to come back in just a moment. We've been a lot more serious. So it's back in just 30 seconds with the next segment on, again, back to football. Okay, so September 17th, 1967, the Kayseri Ataturk Stadium in Turkey, 43 dead, at least 300 injured. Fans of Kayserispor and Sivasspor, they were armed with bats, knives and rocks. They began to fight, and a stampede caused all those deaths and injuries. Days of riots followed in Sivas. On the 14th of September, 2008, in Butembo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sokozaki were playing in Nayuki system. It was a derby match, and a mass player brawl was attempted to be finished up by a local police commander. He tried to bring peace and restore a bit of calm. He was stoned by fans. He then ordered tear gas canisters to be fired into the crowd, causing a mass stampede, and 13 dead, 36 injured. The investigation is ongoing 14 years later. 29th of May 1985, the Heysel Stadium in Belgium, 39 dead, 600 injured. It was European Cup final between Liverpool and Juventus. Liverpool fans and Juventus fans have been warring all day, 1 hour before kickoff. Liverpool fans chased Juve fans back up onto the terrace, who they then pushed up against fans who were already crushed against the wall. The wall collapsed. And as I said, 39 dead, 600 injured. March 5th, 2022, this year, Estadio Corregidor in Mexico. There were no deaths officially announced, but 26 seriously injured. Fans of Querétaro and Atlas FC, they continue the next phase of their 15-year battle between their barras, or as they call them, the Ultras. What's called the Ultras. February 1st, 2012, Port Said Stadium in Egypt. This was after, of course, the coup in Cairo. 74 dead, 72 of those football fans, or 73 of the football fans, and over 500 injured, because after seeing their team beat Al Ahly 3-1, Al-Masri fans converged into this visitor section, where they stoned or clubbed or stabbed or threw to their death 72 visiting fans. 1 Al-Masri fan died and 1 police officer as well. The Egyptian league was suspended for 2 years afterwards. In 1964, the 24th of May, Estadio Nacional, Peru, 328 dead, but there are actually more because they didn't count the gunshot victims, and 500 injured. Peru were playing Argentina when the home fans, enraged by the referee's disallowance of an equalising goal with just 6 minutes to go, they invaded the pitch. The police, trying to restore calm, fired tear gas into the fans, causing a stampede for the exits, where hundreds were crushed to death. Those people, of course, who stayed in the stands, who didn't leave, all survived. Now, you'll notice I didn't mention the 1985 Bradford fire disaster, where Bradford City Grandly caught fire, and of course the 1989 Hillsborough disaster, because neither of those were caused by the fans themselves. They were innocent parties to it, and of course they were, well, we can blame the football clubs and the government at the time in Britain for that. Last night, the early hours this morning, of course, there was a huge tragedy in Indonesia, where it's been announced 125, 129, 174. We don't know how many fans were killed in it. This is the scenes here in Indonesia. These are the pictures of the victims that, as they've been taking pictures to try and find out their families. Fans who were attacked by the police because the fans invaded the pitch. The police then fired tear gas canisters, which of course caused a mega riot in itself. Andrew, I'll start with you on this. This was an absolutely horrible situation. We don't like to see it, but it just seems to be the latest in a long line of events in Indonesia, and of course in football as well.
Absolutely horrifying, absolutely shocking. I mean, the first I heard of it from a colleague of mine tried to contact the manager of one of the clubs, who's from Chile, I believe. And when a tragedy like this comes out, you see the conflicting reports, and you don't know exactly who to believe. But from my understanding, there were a couple of factors that are quite important to understanding this. Firstly, the capacity of the stadium was 38,000, but 42,000 tickets were sold. The security ministry claimed they suggested you shouldn't be selling that many tickets, which sounds like a fairly blindingly obvious thing, and also that it should be staged in the afternoon, not the evening, which is quite a common occurrence in big matches. And this was an important match. The home side were under pressure, and their advice was ignored. I did see comments laying blame early on, and I'm never comfortable with this when there's such a tragedy of such epic proportions like this. It shouldn't be about apportioning blame. It should be, firstly, what exactly happened? What was the timeline of events? The stampede that we are led to believe has caused the majority of the deaths and casualties here, because there are hundreds more seriously injured as well. a lot of stadium disasters have happened because gates have been closed and fans have simply not had space to move into. You mentioned Hillsborough was one example. Of course, in Moscow in 1982, there was the Luzhniki disaster, similar situation where a gate being closed. I don't know the details of that as things stand at the moment, but the use of tear gas is, I think, the third and perhaps the most important detail here. FIFA statutes say tear gas shall not be used under any circumstances inside a stadium, and it quite clearly was. That's not speculation. You can see pictures, you can see footage. Tear gas was used. And there's only one way, sadly, a situation is going to go if tear gas is used, because pure panic happens. I've been to a very small fourth-tier Italian game when tear gas was used outside the stands, and I don't know if anybody else has experienced it. It's a horrible, horrible, disorientating experience. And your first instinct, your only instinct is, I've just got to get out. I'm not even looking where I'm going. I'm not even thinking about the consequences. Where you put 40,000 people, no matter what their mood, no matter what blame is apportioned, it is only going to escalate things. And I have to be honest, how tear gas was even there at all and how it was used, that has got to be central to this investigation, amongst a number of other details as well. I'm not saying necessarily that fans were blameless or should be blamed, but using tear gas to control crowds in an enclosed space is frankly criminal.
Yeah. Craig, on that, I mean, could the same thing happen in England if it kicked off badly in a football stadium? And what does that show about the regard for fans by football authorities? Of course, you've been dealing with these people before as well, as in football.
England is so ripe for disasters in the stadium. Of course, they're bringing back safe standing, and in theory, or working on it. I mean, you'd hate to say any place is ripe for a disaster, but England has a long history of these disasters. The problem, of course, I mean, when you look at English stadiums, a lot of them are listed. You have tiny, tiny doors, just crazy, crazy doors we would never see in America, that people can't really fit through. And of course, the secure, quote unquote, security provided at these stadiums is either volunteer people just doing stuff for free, or it's private prison corps like G4S. So in the UK, you will often have G4S, a firm that has been found repeatedly, in violation of all sorts of human rights statutes, running private prisons and all sorts of war zones throughout the world and all sorts of disputed territories. You have G4S, just a gold standard for scandal type firm, running quote unquote security at major football stadiums. And then you have issues like Tommy Robinson, and the Football Lads Alliance and these racist fronts that are quite capable of unleashing disaster in a football stadium. And of course, everything's going to be shut up, right? Because if we don't have tiny doors that are listed because they were built in the 1910s, we have locked gates, right? Because we want our 35 quid or whatever, and we don't want anyone sneaking in. So it's a disaster. A lot of these antiquated stadiums are wooden for ridiculous nostalgic reasons, having wooden fixtures and wooden seating, and etc. So absolutely, it's a problem.
Alan has himself on mute, just to remind him, because regularly.
Thank you. Yes, I did. I felt I wouldn't, but there you go. I fell back into my old ways. Isel, in terms of legally, where could the blame lie in this? If you were a lawyer being asked to handle this case, where would you immediately start to not investigate, but start to lay out legal cases against?
In the first instance, it's the first thing you would look at is the health and safety position in any relevant jurisdiction, and look at what breaches may have occurred there. In this instance, where it's fan related, the difficulty then becomes that you move from a position where it is what actually started. You're looking at the health and safety position going, okay, were there too many people in there? Were everything like that in the correct positions? And you look at all of these factors, but then you factor in, as Andrew has really well pointed out, the use of tear gas was an aggravating factor here, a hugely aggravating factor. And you look at, from the perspective of, this wasn't meant to be used, so can we look at this and try to not apportion blame, but is this something that we have to look at and consider how much of a factor this was to ultimately what happened. But I think we need to look at we have to take a whole examination position in any instance where you have a huge loss of human life, whether through as a result of fan behavior or as a result of measures that were taken, in all likelihood, however badly conceived, with a view to trying to dispel what was going on. And actually the footage outside the stadium, you can see that this spilled out afterwards because there were cars burnt out, etc., outside the stadium. When we look at tragedies like this and they happen in somewhere like Indonesia, people who are, let's say, fans of the Premier League look at the Premier League and they think, oh, this can't happen here. We have very short memories. We saw what happened even at the Euros, how fans were able to get into Wembley. And the influx of people, they were very lucky that that didn't result in something going horribly wrong in terms of loss of life. But we also need to look at the procedures that are in place when something goes wrong. Because the most important thing in any crisis that breaks out, in any situation where you have large numbers of people, is not basically what you're going to do as the end result. It's what you do to manage something when it goes wrong. Every sports governing body and every large event organizer, concerts, etc., part of their planning is risk planning. They look at what happens if if this happens, what happens if X happens, what happens if Y happens. And the fact that there isn't a plan that doesn't involve using tear gas on a crowd shows perhaps the level of difficulty they got to very quickly. There was a flashpoint, and all of a sudden they're in a position where they can do nothing other than resort to what is a known idea. Tear gas might work very well in the sense of to disperse a crowd if they're coming up a street against you. A stadium, think of it like a circle. It's a fixed area. People, if they can't get out, bottleneck, because they're not able to go up a street or onto a side street. They have a limited number of ways to get out. And I think football as a whole needs to, and any sports organization or that is hosting an event where there's a huge loss of life, they need to deal with all actors in that position, whether it's ban fans from games, whether it's punish clubs and sanction them, to make people look at the practices they have in place for health and safety, because this isn't a one-off, it's a continual thing that is occurring at major sports events where we see security isn't in place to deal with crowds, and the crowd control measures are entirely insufficient and incorrect to deal with what is actually going on when something goes horribly wrong.
We saw the Champions League final in Paris this year when fans, now there were Liverpool fans involved, no matter what they would say, there were some who came in without tickets who ran into the stadium. I spoke with, as I said, a Russian friend, I said this on air, a French friend who was there at the match. He was being crushed out, but then all of a sudden they were sent off to a normal gate and they were let in very, very quickly. And as he said, people who were jumping over the walls who were not related to either team, they were local youths running into the stadium, and they were sent off to a completely empty block that wasn't their own, and they didn't know what was happening in there. So, it is a strange situation. Before we wrap up, because I have one little sort of mini test for you all, I'll just answer it very, very quickly. I'll start with Isa. You're the last person, so I'll come back to you first. Why, two lines, why does this happen in soccer and not in rugby, for example?
Poor crowd control measures in place, and perhaps the type of events where there isn't a consideration as to how fans are allocated. Yes, you divide fans up, but if there's a flashpoint, perhaps people would argue the type of fan, but you don't see this happening at boxing. So what does that tell you? Football fans.
Andrew, question to you before I come to Craig. Is it just because, it's the policing, or is it down to the fans and the fan mentality?
I think actually he sort of makes a very, very good point about the segregation. But my experience of rugby in England is limited to zero segregation between fans. And I almost think when you concentrate away fans in one pocket, I understand the reasons for it. I'm not necessarily arguing against it. Perhaps it's a very difficult answer to come to. But when you concentrate, you make it more of a us v them mentality. I'm not saying fans are completely blameless, but you set up that atmosphere. I mean, look at how fans are divided. It gradually, I've noticed this over the years, the separation between home fans and away fans in football is slowly just getting a little bit further and further apart. It's still woefully insufficient, but even no matter how far the separation is, the way fans are allowed to leave the stadium, perhaps that could be looked at. It would take a lot more policing. It would take a lot more planning. And we've seen, especially through the pandemic, how clubs have been loath to deal with the cost of hiring game day staff, the way they employ them. And you can see basically their priority is we'll tick the box to say, look, we've got the, as Craig says, the security firms will go with whatever fits quickest. They need to be trained better how to funnel fans away. And I think maybe that's the problem. It's probably segregation may not actually be helping.
Craig, people will always say that, in America, in North America, because they include Canada in that as well, there's no problems because there's no away fans. That's a nonsense, because you've got in Mississippi, you've got the big NCAA showdowns. In New York, you've got the Islanders playing against the, Rangers. I've just blanked for a moment. There is fan interaction, but the fans sit together as well as they sit in their own blocks. So why isn't the same kind of violence on display and the same kind of reaction to fan misbehavior on display as we see in Indonesia or Peru or England? Craig's muted.
Sorry, it is baffling. I truly don't have a good answer. I will say in the States, we do have cheesy, patriotic, that's where the fighting happens. And I remember the only time I ever nearly got in a fight in an American sporting event was when I wouldn't stand up to say everything, say all the patriotic stuff that they make you go through. And that's where the emphasis is in America. And, you do see a huge drinking culture in American sport, but boy, it does spill out violently, but not to the extent that so-called English hooliganism or the so-called old firm stuff has spilled out in England or Indonesia, stuff like that. It's a little bit baffling.
Because I've seen it, and something as well I've seen in Germany as well, where there is a history of violence and there is violent thugs following teams, even going to matches, not banned. They still go to watch their teams. I've seen him in Eintracht Frankfurt, I've seen him in Cologne and in Hertha Berlin. But they're drinking beside the stand, and then they come in after drinking and come out at halftime and drink and go back in again. In America, or in Canada as well, I used to love going to, say, for example, to see the old Montreal Expos when I was in Canada, because I wasn't drinking at the time, but you could sit there and have a drink. The same in ice hockey in Germany, you're sitting in your seat just drinking away. Okay, on that note, I'll end on a good note, because I have a little test. Craig, you'll like this one, okay? This is what happens next. Okay, what happens next? So you all have to, and I picked a video from a place in Ireland where this girl that I mentioned comes from with the accent. And again, this girl was stunningly beautiful, but the accent it was just kind of like I was in love, and then like, oh God, no. And it was just like, you just think of a wilting flower, just like that. Just not in any sexual term, but just in a kind of an emotional way.
We're going down a very, even by our standards, we're going down a very dark path. Craig, we're not normally like this. We're normally extremely professional, I promise.
Yeah, it was very, so anyway, so here you have to tell me what happens next. I'm going to stop it after about 5-6 seconds. Tell me what happens next. Okay, so it's a minor B football final, Getty football final in Cork. It's a Gaeltacht team, so a team that come from a predominantly Irish-speaking area in West Cork, and the goalkeeper, of course, is about to take a kick out. Craig, I'm going to ask you first. What do you think happens next?
Cocker Spaniel sprints in and kicks the ball away.
Oh, that's really good. That's something that happened in a match in Ireland, but it was a Jack Russell. But anyway, that's really good. Andrew Flint.
Well, I was going to say one of the I didn't. Did you call them umpires, judges, referees?
The white guys, the umpire, yeah.
Oh, but I was going to say one of the umpires runs on and kicks the ball as well. I mean, I think we're all going down roughly the similar route here, but somebody kicks the ball that is not meant to kick it. I'm going for one of the umpires.
No, you're very far away, but it's a good answer. Okay, Isolt.
The keeper goes to kick the ball and he hits the ball off the head of number 4, who is standing directly in front of him.
Well, it's number 14, but you're
14?
not far away, and you're all right and wrong. Actually, you're all wrong, but anyway, I can't
say there's no way I'm right.
I was very specific. Never normally that specific in my guesses.
You would never know how badly this turned out and how this poor young fella, he's only 17 years of age, how his life turned out. I mean, even the girl with the weird accent who wouldn't be talking to him that night in the pub. But anyway, here we go. There's no way you could expect.
It's worse.
Yeah, it's that happens. I did it one time when I was kicking the ball out, playing for Moscow Shamrocks, and I kicked the ball straight out to a guy. He caught it, and I got about 30 meters on it. He caught it and kicked it straight back over the bar for a score, and I was like, I felt horrible, but I turned around, just got the next ball and kicked it out. But anyway. So there we go. All right, so none of you's got a point on that. I'm going to ask you on this one, Isolt, you have to be muted on this. You can't say anything, okay? This for the guys only. What happens next?
God.
I know I stand in line until you think you have the time to spend the evening with me. And if we go someplace to dance, I know that there's a chance you won't be leaving with me. And then I go and spoil it all.
Okay, so beautiful girl. She's a really handsome, good-looking guy. She's walking out with her boyfriend or husband or whoever it may be, or her boss, who knows, and she drops her phone number into his pocket. What happens next, Andrew Flint? No, wait, you answer first. Craig, what happened next?
Well, I've seen this. This is a buddy cop movie. The guy, he's dropping the location to the girl. That's his partner, and she's walking out with the criminal. I've seen this one.
Oh, Craig, brilliant. Andrew.
I can't top that. That's fantastic.
That's a brilliant answer.
Well, the only clue you've given me is you said that Isolt has to mute it, so I've got to try and think along those lines. I'm assuming that it's not actually a phone number, but it's like the kickoff time for tomorrow's GAA game, and you've got to start marking the cards tomorrow. Make sure you're there on time. Something along those lines.
How did they not listen to us earlier at all?
I know. I get the. Oh God, Isolt. I get. Look, we'll play it through in full. This is for ESAT Digiphone. And it's the thing is that, they're trying to introduce cheaper SMS, cheaper texting. This is why.
I know I stand in line until you think you have the time to spend the evening with me. And if we go someplace to dance, I know that there's a chance you won't be leaving with me. And then I go and spoil it all by saying something stupid like,
"Hey, you kid! It's me, the guy from the bar! No, honestly it is! Hello?"
Now all Speakeasy customers can send and receive text messages. Speakeasy, just pay and type.
I think it was very good.
Dear Lord Almighty, is that what people from Cork sound like?
No, that's from Louth or somewhere like that. Or somewhere up
just
north.
about to say, wherever it is, I'm not going there.
It's not
Cork.
Pardon?
Cork is worse.
Yeah, Cork is far worse. Yeah,
If Cork's worse than that, I'm definitely not going to Cork either.
No one will go to Cork or
Jeez.
support me. Someday they'll be their own country, and we won't have to deal with them.
Well, that's what they want, isn't it? I thought they wanted to be the Republicans.
We'll take Northern Ireland back. We'll give someone Cork. Anyone.
Well, listen, that was when there was the plans for the Russian warships to come sailing off the coast of Cork. Remember the West Cork fishermen were saying that they're going to sail out and stop them. They weren't. They were sailing out to say, listen, we'll hold a referendum and we'll go with you boys. Don't worry about Ireland. You heard it here first. But anyway, I'm sorry. I can never.
Breaking news from Capital Sports.
That's it.
Oh,
I can never go. All right. No, basically that's it. You know, that's a genius advert. I remember seeing that first. I think it was 1999 or 99 when I saw that. And
Nokia 3310. That's definitely late 90s.
Yeah, and it was such a genius ad. And when you heard it, everyone was like, "Okay, it's me, the guy from the bar." You hear so many people saying it, but it was so good. And, sorry, Keane said that next week it'll be the Kerrygold ad, Sally O'Brien. Was that Kerrygold that Sally O'Brien? There's a girl. She's actually, I think, American. Sally O'Brien, and the way she might look at you, and she's sort of like.
I'm sorry. We make only in Ireland could we make Kerrygold basically be porn on your TV with an ad. They went to. We don't know what happened in France, but we know something that should have happened.
And it wasn't to do. It wasn't to do with the horse. I think the horse was sort of an analogy for something else.
I'm not comfortable with us talking about porn, horse, Kerry. What's going on here? We're going down a very, very dangerous road here.
Butter. It was an ad for butter.
Don't add butter to the mix. That doesn't make it any better. That makes it worse. Esau. What are we in, Tijuana or something?
It was.
So we're going to start a new segment on this show for next time you're back. It's called Irish Ads Iseult Enjoyed Greatly Growing Up.
It's realistically, it's the Kerrygold ad was okay. Very, very quickly, folks. So someone first, they're sitting in the kitchen, beautiful Irish little home, and there's a French guy who comes over with the horse, or he's go back with the horse to France, whatever that, and they're sitting down eating bread, and then he simply goes, and this. He's probably from, I think he could have been from the States as well. And he just went like Kerrygold, you have that in Ireland too? I did that. That's what he sounded like. I'm telling you. Am I right, Iseult?
Yes, not bad. Not bad at all.
And when we were like, oh, so she's going to go out with the Frenchie. And then it was like this, anyway, it went very back into 18th century Ireland when the French landed and then married into the people. Same as the Spanish did during the Spanish Armada, but you know, I'm talking history. Craig, you can look that up. It's true, I'm telling you. Okay, on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much. We've got way over time. Thank you so much, Craig, for joining the Madhouse today. Will you rejoin us soon?
Oh, absolutely.
We
on that note.
Here.
Absolutely. I'm always down.
Cian has just wrote in and said that Craig is not going to sleep for a week. Very true. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Cian. Cian's on with us next week, of course. Also, Alexander Zotto as well. Craig, thank you very much. I hope we'll see you again soon. You're absolutely excellent tonight. Thank you so much. Andrew Flynn, thank you very, very much as well. Iseult Cody, a pleasure as always. Well done.
Thanks a million, guys.
Thank you very much. Okay, folks, we will go out right now. I think I was going to say we're going to play out that video again for you, but we're not going to do that. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. Have a great week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. I'm Alan Moore saying thank you and see you again next week for some more Capital Sports 3.0. We'll have Cian McGivney and Alexander Zotto on as well, and another special guest to boot. So until then, take care.